Welcome back. What is this, MMA calculator?
I think it did Attic MMA.
Oh, MMA Attic. Get in our attic.
Welcome back. We're here to bring you all of the betting opportunities that we have identified for UFC 303. You all seem to like last week's format, so we will only be covering the fights where we have placed wagers. All of the other numbers will be posted in the community tab if you'd like to take a look. We'll be starting off this one with the first fight of the night between Ricky Simón and Vinicius Oliveira. These two have a very similar record, both holding 20 professional wins, Ricky having 5 losses, while Vinicius only has 3. In the past 3 years, Ricky has only had as many fights, losing the 2 most recent. Oliveira has not been much more active, only fighting 4 times in that same period. This is a big change for both guys who were regularly taking 3 or more fights per year. Looking more closely at their records, we see that Ricky has taken half of his wins by decision, while Vinicius has 16 KO TKOs and only 2 decision victories. Finishing 80% of your wins by KO is very rare for a bantamweight. He is 3 years younger than Simón and only has 1 fight in the UFC, but it was an incredible KO very late into a great fight that earned him all of the bonuses. Simón, on the other hand, has 12 fights in the UFC dating back to 2018. These fights include some very high-level names, including his dubious win over Merab Dvalishvili. The book odds like Simón and his experience, while the model odds favor Oliveira with his KO power. We will be taking a shot at the underdog here, and we are looking forward to an exciting fight to open the card. Our next wager comes 5 fights later with Charles Jourdain taking on Jean Silva at 145 pounds. Silva is 12-2 with his only losses coming by decision back in 2017 and 18. He does not carry much high-level experience into this fight, having come off the Contender Series in 2023 with only 1 UFC fight since then. Charles, with a 15-7-1 record, certainly comes into this fight with more experience. He also has 12 fights in the UFC. Unfortunately, his promotional record is 6-6, with 3 of those losses coming in his last 5 fights. Fortunately, Charles has never lost by KO TKO, which seems to be John's bread and butter. Silva has finished 11 of his 12 wins, 9 by KO TKO, and 2 by submission, and nearly all of those have came in the first round. This is almost a mirror of our last prediction. Despite the recent losses, the model prefers Jourdain and his experience in this matchup, showing him to be a -138 favorite over the KO power of Silva. The book also sees it this way, although a bit less. This one feels a little iffy, but we are getting enough value here to bet Jourdain as the favorite, so here we are. Rounding out the prelims, we have a middleweight bout between Joe Pfeiffer and Marc-Andre Barriault. Pfeiffer is 6.5 years younger and has 9 less fights in his professional career. At 12-3 with a loss in his last outing, Joe has finished 8 of his wins by KO TKO. Marc-Andre also prefers to finish the fight on the feet. He has 10 KO TKO wins with a record of 16-7. Both of these men have only suffered 1 KO loss, although Joe's was due to his elbow exploding while being slammed, not a KO punch. We are exactly in line with the book here, minus the VIG. With the .2 rule in effect, we have placed a bet on Joe Pfeiffer. It's hard to predict how this fight will finish, but I think the most likely result is Pfeiffer by KO TKO. We move right along to the first fight on the main card, a welterweight matchup between Ian Garry and MVP. Ian Garry is only 26 years old and still undefeated at 14-0. His opponent, Michael Venom Page, is more than 10 years older at 37 and has 24 professional fights with only 2 losses. MVP does have a 5-inch reach advantage, but this is nothing new to Garry, who has given up reach in his last 2 fights. MVP only has 1 fight in the UFC, but his time in Bellator cannot be ignored. He was fighting very high-level opponents, most with more fights than Ian. All in all, these are 2 very unique strikers that could surely present a problem for each other. This fight could have an incredible KO that elevates one of these guys to the title picture. It could also be two men staring at each other, waiting for the perfect counter strike. The bettors like Ian Gary's chances here, and the model thinks it's a pick'em. Ian fell within the .2 rules, so we placed a bet, but we wouldn't mind him losing this one to a spectacular KO. The next fight between Mayra Bueno Silva and Macy Chiasson provides us with another betting opportunity. These ladies are both 32, just a month separated in age, and they have very similar records. 3 losses each, with Macy winning 9 and Mayra winning 10 with 1 no contest. Macy is the much longer fighter here with 5.5 inches in reach and 5 inches taller. Mayra is coming off a loss to Raquel Pennington for the vacant bantamweight title, but before that she had racked up 5 consecutive wins. One of those wins, against Holly Holm, was later overturned when Bueno Silva tested positive for the ADHD drug Ritalin. Meanwhile, Chiasson has had a difficult time actually fighting. Of her 13 fights scheduled since 2020, only 6 of them have actually happened. Her last 5 date back to early 2021, of which she has won 3. Both of these women finished their last win by submission, but with each of them having takedown percentages in the high 30s and defense in the 60s, it may not make it to the ground. This is a true 50-50 fight as far as the books are concerned, and our model has it very close as well. We are giving a slight edge to Bueno Silva, which deserves a bet. If this fight goes to the ground, we expect a win here, but with Macy being much more active with takedowns, she will likely control where the fight takes place. Our first light heavyweight fight of the night between Anthony Smith and Roman Dolidze takes place next. Smith has been fighting since he was an infant and has a record of 37-19 at 35 years old. Dolidze, just days older, has less than 1/3 as many fights at 12-3. Dolidze only has ever lost by decision, with 2 of them in his last 2 fights, and all 3 coming in the UFC. Anthony, on the other hand, has taken more than half of his losses by KO TKO, of which Roman has 7. Anthony did look good in his latest victory only a couple of months ago, but his UFC career has been very up and down. He does have a tendency to go on 3-fight win streaks, so we may be looking at number 2 of 3 this weekend. The model has this fight very close. With some leniency on book favorites, we were instructed to place a bet on Dolidze. We like this bet, but Anthony Smith is the best in the world on paper, so we could be looking at a loss here. We expect UFC 303's co-main event between Brian Ortega and Diego Lopez to be an exciting fight. Diego, with a record of 24-6, does have many more fights than Brian at 16-3, although much more of his career was spent in the regional promotions. Lopez only has 4 UFC bouts under his belt as compared to Ortega's 11. There is no question who has faced better competition, with Brian going head-to-head with 3 former UFC champions. They both have finished exactly half of their wins with submissions. Brian takes most of his remaining wins the distance, while Diego's remaining wins come almost exclusively by KO TKO. Ortega has shown that he's extremely durable, but he does have 2 losses by TKO. One of them was a doctor stoppage, while the other was due to a shoulder dislocation, so he has never been properly stopped by KO or submission in his entire career. Lopez also has no submission losses and hasn't been finished since 2018. All of the data is pointing to this fight being a battle of attrition between 2 guys that eat more strikes than they land. The book odds are slightly in favor of Lopez, which allowed us to place a bet on Ortega as an underdog. We believe that the value is worth the risk here, but Diego could very well use this to reach the top 5 at featherweight. Finally, the late notice main event rematch between the light heavyweight champ Alex Pereira and Yuri Prochazka. Both of these guys stepped up on late notice, so there will be no known preparation advantage. They both fought and won by KO at UFC 300, each only having that one fight since their first bout in November of last year. Yuri came into their first fight after a 1.5-year layoff due to a shoulder injury that caused him to vacate the title. Looking back at their first fight, we see that Alex was able to do a lot of damage to Prochazka's lead leg with kicks, while Yuri was able to press forward and didn't face much resistance with a takedown against the cage. The second round brought an early firefight where Yuri looked to have hurt Alex, but when he tried to engage in a second phone booth battle, he was dropped by Pereira and ate a ton of elbows until the ref stopped it. Some argue that the fight was stopped early, which makes the rematch all that more exciting. Our bookie believes that Alex's jungle magic is too strong, while the model sees Yuri getting his wish of a fight free of magical spells. We've placed a bet on Yuri and can't wait to see these guys run it back. With the strategy update fully implemented, we were able to find 8 wagers for this card, with a surprising 4 of them being on favorites. The Bueno Silva bet is a pick'em, but showing as a favorite because of the negative book odds. The remaining 3 are on underdogs, Vinicius Oliveira being the biggest at plus 180. Our total risk for this card was 11.25 units, and we stand to profit 9.06 units if everything hits. Good luck with any bets you are placing this weekend, and don't forget to check out the community tab if you'd like to see the rest of the numbers. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you early next week with the results for PFL Week 6 and UFC 303.